Hey everyone, welcome back to today's video about Nio and the general automotive and electric vehicle market. Last week I was away on vacation, so today I will go through last week's numbers as well. So starting with the standard weekly delivery numbers, we can see that over the past couple of weeks, actually Tesla has been doing fairly well. You can see it also on the graph over the last 7 weeks average, where you can see the sharp uprise in the trend line on the red numbers for Tesla. So this is good for Tesla, especially knowing that going into September there will be, I believe, a bit harder and much more harsher competition from Nio and Xpeng. Both companies are launching new brands and new cars in that price range that threatens Tesla's Model Y sales. So yeah, good for Tesla to see now for Q3, essentially halfway through Q3, which represents essentially the best quarterly, at least half of a quarter numbers for Tesla to date in China. But I still believe, let's wait and see, because Tesla's delivery numbers could be threatened as we go into the second half of the quarter. You can also see that LiAuto, trending slightly upwards as usual. Now for Nio, it's maybe some worrying sign. You can see that we are down around 3,300 over the past last 2 weeks each actually. After a good start for first week of August, we can see that the second 2 weeks are not doing that great. But in all honesty, we are still up around 9,000 deliveries, which would be still with 10, I think that's 10 working days left. So yeah, I think, we will get close to 20,000. Maybe my own, at the end of last month, I kind of hoped for 22,000 deliveries for August. Maybe now we have to scale that back down to, let's say, again, 20,000 or even 19,000. Difficult to say, But honestly, 1,000 here and there won't affect Nio long-term trajectory. I do believe there could be a possibility that as they are manufacturing cars for the second brand, for Onvo, as we can see here, Onvo is going to be launched on September. Some people say September 10th. I think some people have seen September, a bit later in September. But they already, rolled off a few cars of the manufacturing line. And we know that there are some discussions about, maybe they shutting down some of the Nio lines in order to produce Onvo. Difficult to say, how many, or let's say in worst case scenario, how much damage the Nio deliveries will take as they are launching or ramping Onvo. And also there's, if you remember way back earlier in the year, I was kind of cautious and worried about a scenario where Onvo cannibalizes on Nios deliveries. Could be possible, maybe some people say that, okay, this Onvo car is good enough, why should I spend a bit more money on, I don't know, EC6 or ES6 or ET5. So that's also a potential, but that's not necessarily really bad for Nio, because it's not like they are going and buying Teslas, they're going and buying Nio's second brand. Now how that margins look like on Onvo, difficult to say. But yeah, so I wouldn't be too worried for Nio's slight, downtrend over the past 2 weeks. And this is something that we've seen previously as well. You can see here that, for example, on the week 28, there was fairly weak number for Nio, 3,400. You go back again, week 24, 3,400, and then 3,500 on week 23. And then the week before, all-time high essentially. So it's not a straight line for Nio. We've seen this, up and downs, but the good thing is we still, well above 3,000. We are not, at the 1900s or those kind of numbers that we saw very early in the year. So I'm not too worried at all. I think I also saw that the general Chinese, let's say, electric vehicle market is up quite a bit. You can see, according to Tinker Car on Twitter, or X these days, Chinese battery electric vehicle sales is up almost to 3 million year to date, and this represents 16% increase compared to the previous year. And in that stage, Nio is I think ranked number 5th. So this is really interesting. You should also remember that BYD sells a lot of cheaper cars as well. So they are selling volumetric much more cars than Nio does. But some of the cars are, priced, I don't know, like at 10, 12,000 US dollar. Whereas some of the Nio cars are selling for around 50,000 US dollar. So essentially BYD would need to sell 5 of those in order to sell, to have as much sales or revenue as Nio sells one. So yeah, it's not, apples to apples, but I quite like this, Nio being ranked 15 in China year to date, knowing that Nio kind of occupies the higher end where the competition is the most, and also where you could say that there is much lesser demand for the expensive cars. Once you go from 50 to 60,000 US dollars compared to 20 to 30,000 US dollars, there's gonna be much less demand on consumers out there. So yeah, I think Nio is in a good position. We can also see that Xpeng just had their earnings report earlier today in the morning, and I found, some nice increase in margins for Xpeng. Actually, if you look here, you can see that Xpeng's gross margin went from, here we can see, so they went from 12.9% to somewhere close 14%. And you can see that they kind of been increasing over the past 2 or 3 quarters. Is that something that we can see for Nio? Increase of margins? Highly likely. Again, look at the lithium carbonate price. Over the past, let's say 4 years now, I was a bit scared of this, uptick in, let's say, March and April. I was, worried maybe we will go back to the, 180, 200,000. But what happened instead is we're going another step down now. So we are now well under 100,000 for the lithium carbonate price in Chinese currency. So I think, this is also, one good sign why, for example, Xpeng saw this nice increasing gross margins. Also some other reasons for that. Xpeng has, some nicer sales of, they are selling a bit more expensive cars, I think, compared to last year. At least that's what I read on the earnings call. So yeah, it's not only due to the lithium carbonate price, obviously. But going to Nio, looking at the, let's say, my own expectations. Again, this is Q1 numbers. Now, we know the deliveries for Q2, and the earnings report will be reported, I think, let's see here, on the September the 3rd. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. My own numbers are, I'm a bit, let's say, interested in seeing the gross profit. This is very important to me. That's one of the first lines I look at. Sure, the revenue, but I think the revenue will come in at around let's say 2.2 to 2.4 billion, thereabouts. But the interesting part for me is the gross profit, which would then also easily be translated to the gross margin. If we play with these numbers, if we decrease the gross profit from 10.1% to, let's go with 9%, we can see that the gross profit based on that revenue would, it goes from 240 million, and it decreases from 240 million to 214. So that's a 25 million decrease in gross profit for roughly 1% of gross margin. That's that's gonna be interesting, because if the research and development stays the same, I suspect it kind of will stay in the same ballpark, because they cut quite a few employees just a few quarters back in order to get the R&D expenses in control. The SG&A is interesting. You can see that the previous quarter was around 415 million. Quarter previous to that, so the last one in 23, was 560 million. Difference being that, they sold 20 more thousand cars in Q4 last year than Q1 this year. So it would be, realistic that the SG&A would be a bit higher if you sell more cars. That's the reason why I kind of increased. Previously I had the same 415 for also Q2, but I, let's increase it to 455. Then the loss from operations would be around 650 million, and the net loss, I would say, I don't know, below 600. Hopefully closer to 500 than 600, but I'm hopeful that we will be at least below 600. So sure, that's an improvement over the last, let's say, I don't know, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that would be, improvement over the past 6 quarters, which is good. But yeah, I mean, it's not great. I would like us to be, below, I don't know, below, let's say 400. in best case scenario, and in order to be able to achieve, you know, let's say almost 300 in the end of the year, because I think that's gonna affect the stock price. That's the most important thing. No one is gonna care about gross profit and, you know, revenue. Everyone is looking at the loss from operations and net loss, because Nio has been bleeding and raising capital through dilutions quite a few times over the past, you know, couple of years. I also like to follow this gentleman on Twitter, Allo Joe, on give him a follow. Really nice graphs. And I think, you know, Nio has raised capital quite substantially. I think last time was 2 billion, previous to that was 1 billion, and then close to 600 million. So they diluted the stock quite a bit, and I don't think, I mean, sure, there's room for more. I wouldn't say this is the stop, but this is the end. But in a best case scenario, I would like us to, you know, stop making our huge losses as Nio has been doing over the last couple of years. I think it's possible. The stock is back over $4, which sounds good if you compare it to 3.5 that it was not long ago. But again, if you zoom out, it's just a carnage. So in order for, I think this bleeding here, sure, part of it was the blow off top on everything going up. But part of the bleeding, I genuinely think, was because of the net loss. Nio is making too much of a loss. They need to show, you know, good numbers here. Good gross profit, nice gross margin. Be careful with R&D expenses and SG&A. You know, they are selling 10 times less cars than Tesla, but the SG&A is, you know, maybe, I don't know, 3 to 4 times. Actually, we can look at it quickly here. You can see that Nio is roughly 2 times of Xpeng, and they are right now selling around 2x Xpeng, so it's fine. But then look at Tesla. Nio is around 1/3 of Tesla's SG&A, but Tesla is selling, you know, I don't know, let's say 1.6, 1.8 million cars this year, whereas Nio will be at 200 to 250. So that's a factor of, that would be a factor of, I don't know, 6-7 times, but for in number of cars sold. But they have, you know, essentially they spend two times more on each sold car in SG&A expenses roughly than Tesla does. So they are not a lean company, I wouldn't say. But then again, you know, we know that Nio also has the battery swap station, of which there was quite nice update today. A lot of Nio power discussion going on Twitter these days, and they said that they partnered up with around 20 auto brands now, and they will build a new manufacturing plant for 1,000 capacity of 1,000 more Nio battery swapping stations, which were supposed to go online this year, but the CEO now mentioned that it could possibly be delayed a bit, which I'm not worried at all about, because I think it's a good move to not, you know, spend too much capital. They have already around 2,400-500 swap stations, and they could be used a bit more on a daily basis, so that they are not, you know, capped in terms of service capability. So I think it's a good move on Nio to be, you know, reducing the R&D, reducing the SG&A per sold car. It's gonna be nice. But the only interesting part for me now is, you know, wait for the 3rd of September, see the numbers, and also in terms of the deliveries. It's gonna be really interesting if we see, you know, a nice jump to 4,000 or 5,000 next week, and then maybe another 4,000 or 5,000 the week after that. That would put us again back to 20,000 or thereabouts. And we know that in September we will have Onvo launching. Onvo is gonna be, I do think it's gonna put real pressure on Model Y. It's gonna be cheaper, looks like easily as good, if not better, much nicer interior in my opinion than Tesla Model Y, even with the updated Tesla Model Y coming up later this year. So I think, yeah, I think the worst, I would say, is over, in my opinion. But not for the, you know, stock price. It's difficult to say. I'm talking about for the company. I do think the company will survive if you have ice in your stomach, and if you endure this, you know, whatever many years it requires. When we are going into 2026, 2027, as the Chinese electric vehicle market sales still go up, you know, 20%, 15% each year from now, there will be more demand. The weaker players will have to throw the towel in, and I think the pricing pressure is gonna ease off. We already see that the European Union is kind of backing off the tariff that they introduced or talked about just a few months ago. So I think the pricing level of the electric vehicle cars will also be possible to increase very, quite substantially in the coming 3 years. And I do not think that Nio will go out of business before that stage. So yeah, I think that's gonna do it for today. Be careful on how much of your allocation in terms of the stock you put into Nio, but I think, in my honest view, I think the worst is most likely over, at least for the company. Maybe not for the stock, but they have some nice cash on hand, and they seem to cut the losses quite a bit over the past, at least two let's say quarters, if you consider that the previous quarter has just only 30,000 car deliveries. So that's gonna do it for today. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and see you in the next one.